Hey everybody, and welcome to my free online training, How to Master High Converting Sales Demos with no experience or sales skills, even if you've never sold anything before. I appreciate you taking a few minutes today to attend this session. In this session today, I'll share a bit more about who I am. I'll also walk through who this training is intended for, and then we'll go through a few different line items, if you will, that share just some of the things that I've encountered running demos myself. Also things that I've heard that are kind of pitfalls for others who are either new to sales or even for those who are more experienced in sales. It's these skills that one can struggle with over and over again. And they can make the difference between a mediocre sales demo and a stellar one that ultimately converts into customers for you. So appreciate you joining today. A couple of housekeeping items. This training is probably best viewed via a desktop or laptop as opposed to mobile, just from a formatting standpoint. And if you have any questions about the training itself or anything that I covered today, you can reach me at Jesse, that's Jesse, at jessewoodbury, WOODBURY.com. My website is also jessewoodbury.com for more information. So without further ado, let's jump into the training. I want to get you as much value as possible up front, so we'll dive right into it. I'll start with what you'll get out of today's session. So something that I see as incredibly important as you start to demo your product or your service to your prospects, the number one most important question to ask on every sales demo. So this is probably the most important part of today's training, is understanding what this question is that you can ask on every single sales demo that will completely change the outcome of that demo. So I'll share this. This is a trick that I learned fairly early on in my sales career. It's one that's paid dividends for me as I've demoed to more and more prospects. It's extremely helpful to get in and ask this one question. It can, again, make a difference between a demo that goes okay and a demo that goes incredibly well and results in next steps and a move through the process, through your sales process. So we'll cover what that question is here in just a bit. You'll also learn how to discuss pricing and handle objections. There's two kinds of objections that I think about as I demo to a prospect. One is objections that they bring up during the demo itself. Those ones are a little bit easier. Because you now know that they're thinking along the lines of some potential objection or some objection, right? But there's also silent objections. There's things that we are unaware of as we demo to a prospect that they may be thinking about and don't bring up. And those things can sometimes fester and actually take you off axis or throw your entire sales cycle into the trash if you don't address those. And it's hard to know how to address those when you don't know what those objections are. So I want to cover a few ways that you can help understand, first of all, the mindset that your prospects might come into as they come into a demo, what their worldview looks like as they come in, but also how you can cover your bases as you demo to ensure that those objections get handled. And then pricing is always difficult. I think a lot of sales professionals, entrepreneurs, anyone who's pitching a demo of a product or service can struggle a lot with, is it too soon to bring up dollars and money? It's awkward. Everyone's sort of conditioned to not talk about money right away. And I have sort of a controversial and go against the grain stance on this, and I'll share more about that here later on in the session. And then lastly, a very simple tactic that I use at the end of my demos, towards the end of my demos, to qualify my prospects for purchase and ultimately help close out the next steps in the demo and the sales process itself. Very simple, something that I actually learned recently, and it's changed the way that I demo to prospects. So I'll share more about that here in the training. And then I will share a coaching program that I'm putting together and launching. This is a sales process training for anyone who works in sales. It's intended for also founders, entrepreneurs, consultants, anyone who is customer facing and demoing products with the intent to actually bring in new customers. So it's very early stage in the process here, and I'll share a little bit more about that program itself. And here's a quick sneak preview of what that looks like. I'm looking for folks that want to help be design partners for me in this process. So what that means for you is you get access to quality information around how to build a great sales process, how to demo in a way that will effectively move prospects through your sales pipeline and get you more customers, more deals closed, and more revenue. And I want to do that in a way that's beneficial to you, but also adds to my business. So I'll share more about that towards the end of the call. But just so you know, I am launching a coaching program that will help you master the art of being able to demo to your prospects, specifically for your business. Who will benefit from today's training? There's quite a long list of who this is intended for. Anyone who's an entrepreneur, those are, anyone starting a business that's trying to get out and put their new product or new service in front of potential customers, consultants, agents. If you run a consultancy of some sort and you're looking to demo your services to prospects, this is a great training to help you craft a framework for doing that more effectively. Of course, sales and business development reps, if you are selling media or software or services or logistics, this is a great way to hone in on a training that helps you, again, create a framework for yourself to be more effective in your role and your job. Ultimately help you make more commissions is the goal here. Technical sales pros, if you work in software or hardware or any sort of technical role where you're selling something very complex, it can be very difficult to convey very complex concepts on a call or a demo. So I want to help make that easier for you by providing resources for you to actually be able to do that in a way that's simple and ask simple questions and simplifies the whole process. Recruiters. So recruiters are sales reps as well. They're selling, rather than selling a product or service though, they're typically selling the idea of a role or a company to a candidate. And so this would be a great training for someone who works in recruiting, who's looking for ways to frame and gauge their candidate's interest in a specific role and qualify that candidate. And then lastly, fundraisers. And really anybody who's out trying to collect money or raise money. That could be if you were demoing to venture capitalists to raise money for your business, or if you're a fundraiser asking individuals or businesses for money to provide for, to contribute to a good cause. Really anybody who's having to present concepts in front of a group of people or a person, and ultimately with the end of gaining economic upside or money from that would benefit from today's training. So who this training is probably not for, if you don't work in sales, if you're not an entrepreneur trying to get new customers, if you're not trying to ask for someone's business or sell or promote a product, this probably isn't the best training for you. If you're not interested in learning how to master a presentation in a way that's persuasive, but also adds value to the prospects, then this training is probably irrelevant for you, and you can go ahead and log off now. So a little bit more about me. Again, my name is Jesse Woodbury. You likely found me in some form or fashion, either through social media or on the web somewhere. But I wanted to just share a bit more about my background. Why am I qualified to speak about delivering sales demos? So I've got about 10 years of sales experience. I moved to Austin, Texas back in 2013, specifically to work in technology sales in the software and SaaS industries. I've got experience selling various types of software solutions. I also did spend some time selling advertisements, so I do have experience in selling media as well. So between my media sales experience and software sales experience, I've kind of been around the block, so to speak, when it comes to selling to prospects. And then I've got experience selling to all different types of businesses and individuals. So early on in my career, I was selling to small business owners, everything from lawyers and doctors to HVAC and plumbers. And then I began selling to small retail business owners, and actually moved my way up to selling into consumer brands, enterprise level companies. And so I started reaching out and selling to executive level prospects in very well-known household name brands. And then most recently, my experience has actually been focused on selling to technical buyers. So engineers, engineering leaders, CTOs, folks that are buying very technical solutions to improve their company's infrastructure, to build software, to improve code productivity and things like that. So I've actually honed in my craft even more on how to sell to someone who is traditionally kind of a skeptical buyer. Technical buyers have very high expectations for the products that they deploy. And as such, there's a lot of skepticism around sales and the sales process. And sometimes that can be really difficult to overcome. But it's been a great lesson for me in, one, honing in on my craft, making sure that I come across as very credible to someone who has a lot of technical expertise and who's highly educated, but also someone who's a skeptical buyer, who might look at a sales rep or a marketer as a little bit shady or slimy. How to be able to build learning to build credibility with those types of buyers is insanely valuable. And I'll try to convey as much of my learnings from being in roles like that through this training as possible. More about me. I have experience working in numerous software startups, very early stage. I've been at companies as large as 1,500 employees, and then I've been at 10-person companies as well and done sales and business development. I've actually built sales teams as well. So actually this picture here off to the right is a team that I led, the business development team at a venture-backed startup here in Austin. This is us doing a phone call blitz as part of one of our sales campaigns. And then, I've got experience coaching numerous reps on how to improve their craft, how to perfect their messaging, how to create pitches that resonate, and ultimately how to demo as well, how to present complex topics or not so complex topics in a way that prospects understand, find value, and then to guide the conversation and present it in a way that is not awkward. It's not rigid in any way. It helps you as a salesperson feel very confident in your abilities, and it helps your prospects feel good about buying your solution. Lastly, on a personal level, I'm a big fan of working hard and playing hard, very passionate about lifestyle design. I like to travel and participate in things that I'm very passionate about. When I'm not selling, I'm more than likely riding mountain bikes. This is a picture of me in Virgin, Utah. If you don't know where Virgin, Utah is, that's pretty understandable. It's kind of off the map. But this is the site of the annual Red Bull Rampage competition, which is just a fantastic event. And I had the wonderful opportunity to go out and actually ride out there. So more about me on a personal level. Now let's dig into it. So again, I mentioned earlier on the number one most important thing that you should take away from today's training is this. This question has changed the way that I've demoed and been insanely valuable in helping me, one, understand how to guide the demo, the demos that I run, helping me understand and qualify my prospects better, and ultimately delivering a better experience and more value on the sales demos that I run. So let's get to it. The challenge: too many reps, too many entrepreneurs, and anyone who's demoing, they don't spend any time trying to understand what the prospect wants to get out of the conversation. I've sat on thousands of demos. I've done hundreds and hundreds of demos myself. And that is just one thing that's been, a consistency that I've seen across multiple sales demos or pitches or product pitches or whatever it is a lot of times sales reps or entrepreneurs just want to go into talking about their product or them or their solution because they're excited and it's exciting. But what they don't do is ask the question up front of their prospects. Hey, you agreed to take time to meet with me today. What is it that you wanted to get out of today's session? And how can I help drive the conversation, make it worth both of our time to actually deliver what you're looking for. And, again, to make the most use of today's time. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste mine. I want to set expectations up front and really understand what it is that you want to take away from today's session so I can deliver on that. Super fair ask. Every prospect that you say that to is going to love you and they're going to really appreciate that you bring that up on the front end of the call. And it helps set a great tone for the rest of the sales demo, right? If you ask that right up front, hey, before I get started, I want to understand how you got to us, what you want to take away, and how we can make the most of today's time so that this is beneficial to both of us. You'll get a lot of respect from the prospect that way. And they will likely bring up things that are pain points for them in their business or their life that you can then drill in on and tailor your presentation around those specific challenges, making it so that they pay attention for the majority of the demo. It helps you sort of understand and contextualize exactly how your business can help them. And again, they will respect the heck out of you for being able to actually touch on what's important to them and not wasting time with small talk or giving a sort of long and drawn out demo that doesn't actually address any of the pain points that they have. So challenge number one is not taking time at the front end of a sales demo to actually ask the prospect the question, what is it that you're hoping to take out of today's session? That's the question. What is it that you're hoping to take out of today's session? I want to make sure we're making the most of our time together today. So I'd love to understand more about what it is you'd like to learn today. So that's challenge number one that I see, and a huge game changer when it comes to demoing your product or service. So objection handling, pricing discussions, and actually being able to read the room. Now, even if you do demos over the phone or through a webinar, like a Zoom meeting or something like that, it's still important to be able to actually read the room with your prospects. And so this brings me to our second challenge, which is, objections that are both expressed out loud and silent objections can actually put you into a tailspin as a rep. They can make you spin your tires, make you second guess yourself, and it can end up being very awkward as you discuss, concepts like, hey, what's our next step here? Hey, what is your budget for something like this? Hey, is this something that you're actually interested in? So objections are hard a lot of times, but there's some pretty simple tactics that you can utilize to actually just overcome those objections, or even ignore those objections and just knock them off the table and completely not acknowledge them. And so I'll get into that here in just a second. And the other aspect is, typically on a first demo, it can sometimes be challenging to bring up money or pricing. We're all sort of conditioned from a young age to not talk about money. It's impolite. It's something that can be kind of nerve-wracking or difficult. And especially I see this especially with founders and entrepreneurs that come in and maybe they're new to presenting money or pricing to a prospect, and it can be kind of a strange feeling. So I want to also share a few tactics that I use to talk about pricing in a way that's not awkward, in a way that you can get feedback from the prospect themselves, and you can walk away feeling like you've not left any money on the table and that you've presented it in a way that's beneficial to them by adding value first and then asking for the money, right? So solution to the objections, the expressed objections should be pretty easy. I think one tactic that I've learned recently is with objections, you have to sort of pause and internalize yourself if it's really an objection, right? And I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but a lot of times, you'll be demoing, let's say you're demoing a piece of software or something like that, and someone says, hey, what are your guys' security parameters for your company? Are you guys secure? Do you have SOC 2 compliance? That's an example of a security measure that can be taken by a technology company. And a lot of times you have to ask yourself, so is this going to stop the deal from happening? Is this a deal breaker for you as a prospect? If we're not SOC 2 compliant, or if we don't have this, and this comes up a lot of times too with features. So a prospect might ask, can you guys do this? And maybe you don't do that. Maybe your service or product doesn't offer that specific feature that they want. A lot of times reps will then end up getting into sort of a tailspin, and they'll think, oh crap, they want this and we don't offer that. And so this is over, we're done. But a lot of times they're just asking. People are just thinking out loud and asking, and it's not necessarily a deal breaker. So a couple ways you can overcome that is you can be direct and ask them, hey, if we can't deliver this feature, would that be a deal breaker for you? And see what they say. A lot of times what I do though is I just don't even address it. I just keep moving on and say, okay, well, we don't do that today, but we'll look into that and see if we can offer that feature down the road. Or same with like a security compliance measure. Hey, we're not currently SOC 2 compliant today. Let me look into what we're doing on that, and just sort of move on. It's not, a lot of times you'll find that objections that people vocalize aren't really real objections. Rather, they're just thinking out loud. And they're trying to maybe grind your gears a little bit. I don't think that's always the case. I just think that a lot of times people just sort of shoot from the hip and ask random questions. So try to move on from those. As far as silent objections, these are objections that someone may have and they may be thinking and marinating on throughout the whole demo, and you may be unaware because they don't actually ask or raise that objection up to your visibility, right? So how to address those is, try to be thoughtful in the way that you demo. Try to go through and think about everything that you're pitching from a product standpoint and address what you think people might object to throughout your presentation. So if you're working off of a PowerPoint deck like this one, you could go through slide by slide and actually write out what you think people might object to. So an example for this slide is people might say, well, I don't believe there's silent objections. People always just speak their mind. So I could go through and say, all right, I'm going to address that objection, right? I'm going to actually write down my response to that, which is no. Actually, a lot of times, especially when a prospect goes quiet on you and they don't ever follow back up after a demo, a lot of times that's a result of a silent objection that wasn't addressed. And rather than being able to be proactive and get ahead of that, the prospect ends up falling off the face of the earth and we never knew that they were worried about this specific thing or they had this specific question that they never raised, right? So going through your pitch itself and writing down what you think people's conclusions might be or what they might be thinking about as you go through each slide, or if you're demoing a technical product or a media product, as you're going through and actually showing that, you can think through exactly what questions people might have or what questions might come up in people's minds as they're looking at the specific screens you're showing them. So that's a good way to do it. And then also just be thinking ahead and writing down ways that you can work into your demo script to actually crush those objections before they even come up. So once you've written those all down, you kind of have a good understanding of what people might object to in your offer or in your product. Write those down and then work in ways in your script to actually address those up front. So if someone's thinking about, man, I really like this product, but I don't think it's going to meet with our security requirements internally, or maybe the objection is, I don't think I'm going to be able to get budget approval from my manager to buy something like this. Address that up front. Work that into your actual pitch and say, hey, before we get into the nitty gritty here, I want to understand a bit more about your budget. I want to do a little bit of just qualification discovery. Don't word it that way, but in sales, we call this qualification and discovery. It's let me understand a bit about how the budget works so I can speak to it. And I want to make sure that, I understand your internal budget processes. And that's a way you could address that objection before it even comes up, is work it into your script itself. So hopefully that helps, objection handling, pricing, some of the awkward and uncomfortable discussions that can be had on a sales demo can be pretty quickly and easily addressed right away. So the trial close and qualifying your prospects for purchase. A lot of times what I see both from, again, entrepreneurs, sales reps, anyone who's pitching products is at the end of the call, it can sometimes be a little bit lackluster. Everything sort of falls flat in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the session. And that's what you don't want as the sales professional or someone trying to grab new clients, is you don't want to come up to the very end of a 30-minute or a 60-minute demo and then have everyone on the call just say, okay, well, hey, thanks for your time. Take care, and hang up, right? You want to be able to end on a powerful note and feel like you're in complete control of the process, and to be able to actually have a next step, whatever that is. In a lot of cases, your next step might be, I'm going to have you take your credit card out and let me get that credit card number so I can get that plugged in. If you're selling to larger enterprises or larger companies, that next step might be, hey, how do we get your manager now? And you'll ask it in a more tactful way than that, but how do we get executive sponsorship on this? Or who would we need to show this to in order to move this process along internally to help move towards deploying this for you, right? And so there's some different types of next steps, but the main thing is you want to finish the call on a really strong note. So the challenge is, as I mentioned, the end of the call can be kind of uncomfortable, very confusing. How do you ask for the sale? Is it too soon? A lot of this is dependent on your specific business. If you're selling $1 million a year solution to, Ford or Chevy or Apple or something like that, it probably is a little too soon to ask for $1 million annual sale at the end of a first call. Typically, a next step in that case might be, okay, so who else would need to be involved in this process? And how do we get some time, in the next couple of weeks to connect with all the stakeholders on this decision, right? Or this project or this initiative. If you're selling a, SEO service to a plumber, the end of the call might be, hey, what would it take to move forward with this? If we could deliver XYZ, would this be something you'd be interested in moving forward with today? And that would be the next step, is getting them to pull out a credit card and actually purchase your services. So it can vary depending on the business. But a lot of times, even if you can't get them to close on a first session, you still want to have a next step closed out at the end of the call. So the solution is learning how to read the room, being able to actually understand your prospect's body language if you can see them. If you're on the phone, it's being able to understand intonations in their voice and things like that. But one thing that I've found that works better than anything else is just being very direct with your prospects. So what I've gotten into the habit of doing, and it's worked out really well, is at the end of a demo, I'll typically, after I'm done sort of presenting the pain points and the solution, and then maybe demoing the product or the service itself and showing what that looks like. Visuals can be very helpful in these first demos. I'll actually pause. And I'll ask the question, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, based on what I'm showing to you today, Is there value in continuing conversations? And so this in sales is actually known as a trial close. It's sort of like an if-then close. And so there's a couple of flavors this can take. I mean, if you're selling to plumbers, it might be, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Plumber, based on what I've shown you today, would there be value in moving forward with this right now? And that next step might be, sure, let's get your credit card on file here and get a campaign set up for you, or get, access to XYZ service or solution, right? For enterprise or larger companies, it might be, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Executive, based on what we've shown you today, is there enough value here to continue conversations? And you'll wait and see if there's a yes, no. And if it's yes, great. What is the, let's talk about what next steps would look like. Here's what we typically see. Tell us a little bit more about your internal processes. Who else would need to be involved in this? How does the, procurement or budget process work on your side, et cetera. So it can be different depending on the types of sales that you're doing, but the action is really the same. It's this sort of trial close notion that is, hey, if I can deliver X, would you be willing to move forward with this? Or is there enough value in your mind to continue on with this based on what we've shown you today? So super simple question that will help you lock down the end of the call and take control of the session, the demo, and then, push for that next step, whatever that is based on your business. I also use this with pricing as well. So I didn't mention this on the last slide, but I'll share it on this one. Whenever I deliver pricing, whether that's on the first demo or a later demo, I'll typically be very direct and I'll just say the number off. I'm a big believer in being very straightforward about pricing, especially in 2019. At this point, your prospects just want to know how much things cost. Even at the enterprise level, it's best to just shoot right for the direct mark, give them a number, try to be as exact as possible. And then what I do is I ask, based on what we've shared, is there enough value to justify this price? Or, is this amount aligned with your expectations is another good question you can ask once you've delivered pricing. Something that I used to fall in the trap of, I used to fall into this trap when I delivered pricing was not being specific and saying something like, yeah, we could probably get you guys signed on for about $10,000 a year. You don't want to say about, you want to be super direct and clear. Hey, our solution costs $10,000 a year. Based on what we've shown you today, does this align with what you expected, or does that align with your budget? You can ask the question in different ways, all kind of depending on the context. But the bottom line is, it's good to, once you've delivered pricing, ask the question to get feedback. Because a lot of times what happens with prospects is you deliver pricing and they sort of nod their head, or you hear them say like, oh, okay, great. And then you never hear from them again. And a lot of times the objection might have been, oh, that's way too expensive. We can't do that. And they don't vocalize it. And if you don't ask for the feedback, you never really know. And if that prospect just never responds to you after that, there's a good chance it was because the solution was too expensive, right? And so the best way to do it is, yeah, hey, just to provide some, provide some guidance around what our costs, what costs would be associated with this solution. We are, our solution costs $10,000 annually. It includes XYZ. Based on, your expectations, is this aligned from a value standpoint? So real simple. It's not difficult, but again, these are small things that can change the outcome of your conversations as you're demoing your product or solution. So that is the three, sort of bullet points here and line items that I wanted to cover around how to improve your demos. Certainly you can access a recording of this training yourself. I would love to share that. And that can help you on an ongoing basis. Just remember those three different things and how to ask the right questions and drive the conversation in a way that's valuable for both you and the prospect. So that begs the question, would improving your sales demos be valuable to you and your business and your role, whether you're an entrepreneur, an agent, a consultant, or a sales rep? And if so, would a proven demo framework actually help you scale your business, your sales territory, and ultimately add to your bank account, which is always the goal when you're building a business or a sales team? And then how would taking the complexity and uncertainty out of sales demos impact your business and your revenue? A couple of questions that I'm going to ask you. And in my mind, the solution here is Killer Sales Demos for Entrepreneurs, which is my coaching program. I'll provide more details after this session on how to access that And if you're interested, you can email me at jesse@jessewoodbury.com. I provided that. I'll also provide a link where you can fill out a form and go ahead and get started on a course like this. But Killer Sales Demos for Entrepreneurs is a really straightforward course that dives deeper into some of the concepts that I covered today and helps you craft a framework to be able to pitch your solution to your prospects in a way that gets you those next steps, that takes the awkwardness or the lack of confidence out of those demos, and helps you master the art of being able to present your product or solution to your prospects, solve their pain points, overcome their objections, and actually just more effectively scale your business.